Today, we are diving deep, bypassing the familiar and venturing into the bizarre. We're breaking down 10 facts that prove indigenous ingenuity, social structure, and extreme dedication pushed human culture to its absolute limit. Prepare for a journey into the strange and the brilliant. Number 1. The ant staple, living sutures and Jundal surgery. If you think modern stitches are uncomfortable, prepare yourself for the ultimate act of high-stakes biological surgery. In the deep jungles of Central and South America, indigenous healers had a solution for gaping wounds that make silk thread look completely unnecessary: the soldier ant. This wasn't a remedy, it was a surgical tool. The giant soldier ants are known for their massive, powerful mandibles, jaws so strong they can clamp down with terrifying force. The healer's method was brutally simple, effective, and perhaps the most metal medical procedure ever conceived. The clamp application. The healer would hold the ant's body and carefully guide the insect until its powerful mandibles bit across the two edges of the open human wound, drawing the skin tightly together. The severance. Once the ant had locked its jaws shut, a grip that is literally meant for tearing flesh, the healer would twist the ant's body off, leaving the head behind. The head, with its mighty jaws still locked in the death grip reflex, acted as a natural, biological clamp. These severed heads served as sturdy, antiseptic sutures that would hold the wound closed far longer than the healer's hands could. This practice is the ultimate testament to indigenous engineering and zero-waste resourcefulness. In a world without sterile needles and thread, the soldier ant was a living, disposable surgical staple, a perfect example of using the immediate, hostile environment to solve a complex medical problem. It proves that the human drive for survival will turn any part of the natural world, even the stuff of nightmares, into a vital tool. You aren't just stitching a wound, you are literally closing a gash with the severed heads of insects. It's the kind of ingenious solution that simultaneously inspires awe and makes you deeply grateful for modern medicine. Number 2. The moccasin eviction, Navajo divorce by footwear. Modern divorce is a saga of paperwork, expensive lawyers, and years of emotional misery. But the Navajo tribe, operating under a strict matriarchal society, developed a system of relationship termination that was brutally efficient, silent, and entirely non-negotiable. The entire dynamic rested on the Navajo social structure. The hogan, the traditional home, and all property within it belonged to the woman. Women were the heads of the household, holding all the financial and custodial cards. This placed the husband in a state of permanent, conditional residence. If the wife decided she had finally had enough of her husband, no court appearance, no arguing, and no formal declaration was necessary. She simply executed the ultimate silent eviction. The divorce lawyer in this scenario was a pair of shoes. The wife would quietly place her husband's saddle, symbolizing his livelihood and mobility, and his moccasins or other personal effects just outside the front door of the hogan. When the husband returned home and saw his belongings waiting for him in the dirt, he knew instantly it was game over. He was effectively served with the legal documents. His only option was to pick up his belongings and walk back to his mother's or sister's home, having been silently exiled from his wife's property. This custom is a profound illustration of matriarchal power and a fascinating piece of cultural design. It turned the simple act of leaving your shoes on the porch into a high-anxiety final judgment. It stripped the messy emotional argument out of separation and replaced it with a decisive, visible symbol of a wife's absolute authority over her domain. Number 3. The Holy Troll, Heyoka, and the Sacred Clown's Mission. Imagine a spiritual calling where your entire sacred duty is to be the most annoying, backwards, and contradictory person in the village, and you are worshipped for it. These were the Heyoka, or sacred clowns, of the Lakota and other Plains tribes. The Heyoka received a vision, usually involving thunder and lightning, that bound them to live their lives in reverse. They were holy figures whose primary responsibility was not to lead or heal, but to break every social norm through satire and inverse action. The climate lie. In a blistering summer heat wave, the Heyoka would shiver dramatically in thick buffalo robes and complain of the frost. In freezing winter, they would run around naked, profusely sweating. The logic trap. They rode their horses backwards, said yes when they meant no, and did everything in the most inconvenient, irrational way possible. This wasn't just performance art or a public prank. It was a spiritual necessity for the community. The Heyoka served a critical function: humble the powerful. By acting like utter lunatics and mocking the established serious order of warrior life, they forced the proud and the powerful to laugh at themselves, preventing arrogance and vanity. Reveal truth. By constantly inverting reality, they showed the tribe that the established social order is merely a construct, a fragile thing that shouldn't be taken too seriously. The Heyoka forced people to look at things from a completely different, often uncomfortable perspective. They were essentially holy trolls, using brilliant satire and high-stakes reverse psychology to maintain social equilibrium. Their role proves that sometimes the most profound spiritual truth can only be revealed through absurdity and the complete, conscious rejection of sanity. Number 4. The Fatal Ferment. Yupik and Inuit stinkheads. If you think fermented foods are a sign of sophistication, the Yupik and Inuit peoples took fermentation to a level that was a literal biological gamble. Their delicacy, affectionately known as stinkheads, was a dish that could either provide life-sustaining nutrients or result in a swift, deadly end. The process for creating this prized, mushy, cheese-like sludge was terrifyingly simple. The burial. They took the heads of large fish, particularly king salmon. They waited. They buried the heads in fermentation pits in the ground and simply left them there for a few weeks until the flesh fully decomposed into a rich, fatty mush. This dish was highly valued because it provided essential calorie-dense fats and nutrients needed to survive the harsh Arctic climate. The problem lay in the microscopic details of the fermentation process. If the pit was not sealed perfectly, or if the temperature was even slightly off, the rotting fish would become a breeding ground for Clostridium botulinum, the bacteria that produces botulism. Botulism is a deadly neurotoxin, a tasteless, colorless poison that paralyzes the nervous system. People literally risk their lives for a bite of rotten fish head, accepting the real possibility that their dinner would kill them before dessert. This custom is a grim reminder of the fine line between survival and self-destruction in extreme environments. When calories are life, the risk of gastronomic Russian roulette, where your delicacy might be your last meal, becomes a calculated, necessary gamble. The Yupik were masters of resource-intensive food preservation, but they were playing with one of the most powerful biological weapons on the planet. Number 5. The Unstoppable Predator. Tarahumara persistence hunting. When we think of hunting, we usually picture stealth, traps, or a quick kill. But for tribes like the Tarahumara or Raramuri in northern Mexico, hunting wasn't a sprint, it was an ultramarathon turned weapon. The Tarahumara developed a physiological capability that remains legendary: the ability to run for hundreds of miles over rugged, mountainous terrain without stopping, fueled often not more than chia seeds, or isquiate, and a corn-based beer. Running wasn't exercise, it was the foundation of their culture and survival. They employed a method known as persistence hunting. This involved locating the prey, identifying a large animal such as a deer. The relentless chase: the hunter would simply start jogging after the animal and never stop. The hunter didn't need to be faster than the deer in a sprint. The genius of the hack is that humans sweat to cool down. Deer and most other large mammals pant and cannot efficiently dissipate heat through their skin. The hunter would keep the animal constantly moving, pushing it to its thermal limit. Every time the deer stopped to rest, the hunter would reappear. The deer, unable to cool down, would eventually collapse from sheer hyperthermia and exhaustion. The hunter would simply walk up to the animal and dispatch it. This custom is the ultimate example of turning a seemingly weakness, human speed, into an overwhelming strength by relying on endurance, physiology, and sheer psychological inevitability. To the deer, the human runner was not a hunter. He was a relentless horror movie villain who simply never gave up until the victim dropped dead. Number 6. The walking tank. Tlingit wooden armor. When Europeans met the tribes of the Pacific Northwest coast, they weren't met with simple buckskin. They encountered warriors who looked like walking, heavily armored medieval knights, a terrifying testament to indigenous defensive engineering. The Tlingit warriors developed elaborate, incredibly tough body armor that was virtually unique in North America. Their gear was designed for brute force defense against powerful clubs, spears, and eventually early European firearms. Slatted body armor. They constructed armor from hard wooden slats, often ironwood, meticulously woven together with strong twine or sinew. This allowed the armor to be somewhat flexible while still deflecting heavy blows. The war helmets. To complete the look, they wore massive, imposing wooden helmets carved with the terrifying faces of animals or spirits, totems. These weren't just decorative, they were psychological weapons intended to scare the soul out of their enemies before a fight even began. This layered, thick armor was shockingly effective. It could deflect arrows and spears, absorb the shock of a heavy war club, and there are even accounts from early encounters with Russians of the armor stopping or significantly slowing musket balls, turning a fatal shot into a heavy bruise. Facing a wall of these wooden juggernauts moving and charging with terrifying, carved faces would have been a profoundly unsettling experience. It proves that the Tlingit were masters of both practical ballistic defense and psychological warfare, turning themselves into an almost unbeatable force that combined natural materials with terrifying aesthetic design. Number 7. The black drink. Purification by communal vomiting. Before going into battle or participating in important tribal councils, warriors of the southeastern U.S., like the Creek and Cherokee, engaged in a ritual designed to ensure spiritual purity and extreme focus: chugging the black drink. The black drink was a highly concentrated, dark caffeinated tea brewed from the roasted leaves and stems of the yopon holly, Ilex vomitoria. This wasn't a casual tea party. It was a ritual designed to produce a specific physical result. Warriors would drink massive quantities of the liquid quickly, often for hours. The specific, non-negotiable goal of the ritual was to drink so much liquid that they would immediately, violently vomit everywhere. The belief behind this ritual was that the intense communal heave fest was purging the body of all spiritual impurities, weakness, and bad intentions. By literally puking out the contents of their stomach, they were symbolically cleansing their soul and making themselves pure, strong, and mentally ready for war or diplomatic decision-making. It turns the modern idea of a cleanse on its head. For these warriors, you weren't spiritually ready to lead or fight unless you were retching on the ground with your brothers. It was a shared, miserable, and chemically powerful ritual that ensured everyone was entering the sacred space or the battlefield with nothing but courage and a completely empty stomach.
Number 8. The talking stick, the ultimate debate moderator. In a world where modern politics and even Thanksgiving dinners are often dominated by the loudest, most aggressive voice, many indigenous tribes perfected a revolutionary tool for civilized debate: the talking stick. The concept of the talking stick was simple, yet profoundly effective, transforming high-stakes council meetings from shouting matches into structured, respectful discourse. The rule was, if you held the stick, you had the floor. Absolute immunity. While the speaker held the stick, often a sacred, beautifully carved piece of wood, nobody was allowed to interrupt, shout over, or argue until they were finished and passed the stick on. Active listening. This forced every single person in the council to practice active listening in patience, concentrating entirely on the speaker's point. Equality. It guaranteed that even the quietest elder or the most junior member got their full, uninterrupted say, preventing the discussion from being hijacked by hotheads. The talking stick was the ultimate self-moderating tool. It taught the value of careful articulation, since you only had one turn, and respectful silence. Imagine the productivity of modern group chats, social media debates, or legislative bodies if they were physically unable to speak until a piece of sacred wood was handed to them. The talking stick is a powerful, elegant example of indigenous social engineering designed to ensure democratic equality and productive communication, skills that are tragically absent from much of the modern world. Number 9. The keel hole, memory pottery and funeral rites. Fact 27. When we break a valuable possession today, it's an accident and a loss. But for the Membrous people, a prehistoric culture of the Southwest U.S., breaking pottery was a crucial, deliberate, and deeply spiritual part of a funeral. The Membrous are famous for their stunningly intricate black and white pottery bowls, often painted with detailed geometric patterns and beautiful animal figures. These bowls were highly valued. In their burial rites, a bowl would be placed directly over the deceased person's head. But before it was placed in the grave, the bowl was intentionally and strategically broken. A jagged hole was deliberately punched right through the center of the bowl's base. This was not vandalism, it was a keel hole or pit hole. The belief? The members believed that the pot, like all things, possessed a spirit or life force that was trapped within the rigid clay form. The release? By physically killing the object with the ceremonial punch, they believed they were releasing the pot's spirit to accompany the deceased into the afterlife. The hole created a clear path for the soul of the pottery to join the soul of the person. It is a beautiful, poetic concept of spiritual liberation, turning an act of destruction into an act of profound respect. The irony, of course, is that this sacred ritual drives modern archaeologists crazy, as thousands of priceless pieces of ancient art are found with a deliberate hole smashed right through the best part. Number 10. The economic suicide, potlatch, and the wealth of destruction. In modern society, wealth is defined by how much you hoard, how large your investment portfolio is, how many houses you own. But for the Pacific Northwest tribes, like the Kwakwaka'wakw and Taling, true power was defined by how much you were willing to destroy or give away. The potlatch was a massive ceremonial feast where a chief or high-ranking member would invite rival tribes and community members for a show of power that was fundamentally anti-capitalist. The goal was not to make a profit, it was to demonstrate overwhelming wealth by engaging in economic suicide as a flex. The destruction. The chief would publicly burn piles of expensive blankets, smash highly valuable copper shields, known as coppers, and destroy or throw valuable canoes into the sea. The giveaway. Vast amounts of food, furs, carved items, and accumulated wealth would be given away to the guest, leaving the host utterly impoverished. The true status of a chief was measured not by the amount he owned when he died, but by the amount he publicly annihilated or distributed during the potlatch. The chief who died with the most goods was considered a loser. The one who literally bankrupted himself to prove his indifference to material possessions was a legend. This custom is a powerful example of an economy where prestige outweighs profit. It was a sophisticated social system that ensured wealth was constantly redistributed and prevented any single individual from hoarding resources. The potlatch was the ultimate power move, bankrupting yourself just to show your rivals that you are so rich you simply do not care. This journey into indigenous ingenuity proves that survival is often stranger than fiction. We saw the Navajo divorce executed silently by placing a husband's moccasins outside the door, the Taling building themselves into impenetrable wooden walking tanks, and the Yupapik risking fatal botulism for a taste of the prized, mushy stinkheads. If these examples of cultural genius and high-stakes resourcefulness didn't shock you, then you're holding back. Drop the most bizarre and obscure survival hack or custom I missed in the comments below to school me. And hit subscribe and ring that notification bell to join the next deep dive into history's most unhinged corners.